Hi, everybody. Oh, I can hear myself. Why is that happening? Okay, that's better. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Kirsten Downs. I'm an Air Force veteran, having served from 2001 to 2009, active duty, and also in the New York Air National Guard. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm streaming from just north of Tampa, Florida, land of the Seminole and Tocobaga people. Teaching moment, those of you who know me know that I love teaching moments. I want to encourage all of you to use resources like I did, www.native-land.ca, which maps Indigenous lands. Resources like this challenge us to improve the way that we see the histories of our country. This is one activity that you might even want to take back to engage your chapters in as we learn how to be better allies and meet the historical moment we are living through together. Respect and acknowledgement for our Indigenous community members is of the utmost importance. Thank you for joining us today for this panel with just a few of our incredible women leaders of SVA. My own history with the organization, I'm going to date myself terribly here, spans nearly a decade, starting as a chapter leader and as a past member on SVA's board of directors. In order to get us started, I would like each of the panelists to take just a minute to introduce themselves. With me today is Ashley, Caitlin, Lorena, and Savannah. And Ashley, I'd just like for you to start us off by telling us about your military affiliation, the school you represent, and what leadership positions you have held or are currently holding.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Anderson, and I am a U.S. Air Force veteran. I am currently attending the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and I am our chapter's SVO president.
Wonderful. And next, Caitlin.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin Hetrick, and I attended Baldwin Wallace University and graduated in May of 2019. I served first as the secretary of the Student Veteran Organization there, and then the president. And now I currently work for Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America as a government affairs associate in DC.
Thank you, Caitlin. Lorena, you're up.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lorena Guimaraes. I'm formerly Sergeant G, serving as a Marine helicopter mechanic from 2013 to 2018. And currently I serve as the chapter president for Florida International University and formerly chapter president at Palm Beach State College in Florida.
And Savannah, your turn.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Savannah Turner, a U.S. Coast Guard veteran. I served active duty for 5 years, and now I'm in the Coast Guard Reserve for 5 years now. I am the chapter president at the University of Florida, and I am a second-year PhD student.
Perfect. So something that has always been so important to me when I look at my identities of being a woman and also a leader in the veteran space and a veteran nonetheless, is the whole understanding behind you can't be what you can't see. So thinking about this, I'd love for each of us to take an opportunity to just provide some points on what our leadership journey has looked like. And Savannah, I'm going to go back to starting with you. Can you just briefly tell us how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Well, for military experience wise, I started off as an enlisted person. So I was an E3, so bottom of the totem pole, so to speak. And through that, I kind of went up through the ranks. I made it to E5. Coast Guard ranking doesn't move as quickly as other branches. And that was a struggle, being a junior enlisted person and, you know, trying to understand what leadership meant for me. And then being a follower was super important too at that time. And now I'm an ensign in the Coast Guard Reserve, which is an 01, and I'm in charge of people. And so that's kind of been a bit of a journey, 10 years later. So I went through a lot of struggles in the beginning, and it was very difficult. But through like good and bad leadership, I've been able to kind of figure out what my style is and how I like to conduct myself as a leader. And that kind of mirrors over into my position as a chapter president, as well as I want to create a team environment. I believe in leading as a team rather than as an individual. And so that's kind of how I like to help my chapter, and then also in the Coast Guard Reserve now.
Thank you. And Ashley, could you give us an idea of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so if I'm going back to right before I joined the Air Force, it was because I had started going to school for a year. I kind of realized how expensive it was and that I wanted to not be in debt the rest of my life. So coming from an Air Force background, I knew that my parents would be okay with me joining. So I joined, and during my time in the Air Force, I did leave as an E5, and I held a lot of different leadership positions, not only as a crew chief, which I was, but then I became a unit deployment manager. So I was working directly with my commander, and then I ended up taking a deployment right before I separated from the Air Force. And in that position, I was a financial manager, which I had never done before. So just like Savannah said, I've had good and bad leadership, and it's definitely helped me to be able to become the leader that I am today. So the reason why I'm even SVO president today is because I had started out as our secretary, and as things evolved throughout the year and kind of leadership wasn't happening, I decided to step up and take the reins of ensuring that our SVO was going to stay an organization at our school, because that was kind of a big factor. It was about to not be able to be re-registered. And at that point, it was decided with the other board members that I would be our SVO president. And it was pretty cool. I have always had this leadership quality about me. Even I remember this time when I was in Airman Leadership School, and we're all trying to figure out, like, oh, who's going to be the leader for the class? And everyone just looked at me because I had already been doing everything that the leader was supposed to be doing. So I think, one of my big things is listening to other people and ensuring that everyone's happy, and just it's not about me. And I'm super grateful for the board that I have right now, because we've all been working really hard to get our SVO chapter back and running. So I'm just really happy.
Some key things that I just pulled out of what you said. First of all, you're part of a dual military couple, correct?
Yes.
Is there anyone else on our panel that happens to be military spouse? Okay, so we have a couple people. I just want to make that clear to the audience so that they can say, hey, these are the people that I know who maybe I can talk to, because they have similar experiences to my own. So thank you for sharing that. And the other thing that you said that's so important about qualities of leaders is the ability to listen, to hear, to actually take in and observe and hear what people are saying. So that's a fantastic quality. Lorena, I'm going to go to you. What's your trajectory look like?
Yeah, so I was always the why kid. Why does this work? Why doesn't this work? And I think it wasn't until I got into a military trajectory that I found out, like asking those questions and why things work and why they don't work are really awesome to have as a leader. And so going into the Marines, from the very beginning, you get told like, hey, you're going to be a leader, deal with it. And that's kind of the way I was brought up. And once I left the Marine Corps, I was going through the same student veteran struggle, trying to fit in, and going back into a college sector, it was, why didn't this work for me? Why did certain things, why did I feel this way? And how can I make it better for someone else? So at first I just started hanging out in the Veterans Resource Center. It turns out we had a female chapter president as it is, I saw somebody that was like me. And then after that, I was thrust into the position because I was just there in the room all the time and just having conversations with people. So they were like, you're it. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not doing that. But taking into account, asking those questions and being able to be part of, serving your veteran population is kind of what got me here. And now serving at FIU, kind of bringing that same philosophy into place into serving our people. And like these other wonderful ladies said too, taking stock in what leadership means to you constantly in an evolving basis was part of it. And seeing someone that looks like me, be part of it, or somebody that looks like the people that I followed throughout the years. So it's been very cool.
That's awesome. And I love that you have somebody that you saw in a position of leadership and that helped to sort of motivate you to step up to the plate there. And that's unbelievably important. And I'm hoping that we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but some of those motivating factors that encourage us all to take that step, because leadership can be scary. It can be lonely sometimes. And we can hem and we can haw, but sometimes when we have that little push to take that step, an entire world opens up for us. So thank you for sharing. And Caitlin, how about you?
So leaving the military was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. I didn't want to leave, but it was one of those choices where I had the choice between staying and doing something I loved, or leaving and spending more time with my son and my family. So I chose to leave. And when I like Lorena said, I really struggled with that whole trying to fit in, trying to find my place, because I didn't feel like I fit in with the non-veterans, and then I didn't know where the veterans were where I had lived. So when I got started at Baldwin-Wallace, I heard about our Veteran Resource Center, and from the moment I walked in the door, it was like I was home. Like I felt that instant feeling wash over me, like this is where you belong. And so I knew from that moment that I was never going to not be involved. And so for where I am today, I think the biggest lesson I took was take chances, because I have this dream of not being finished with the Navy. I want to be a public affairs officer. And so after working with my internship, which was with a nonprofit organization dedicated to veterans, Challenge America, they took me to DC for something, and I fell in love with DC. So when I was working on my package for being a public affairs officer, my recruiter told me that there was someone who would interview me in DC, and I would just have to go. And I was like, okay, I'm ready, I'll go. Like, just give me another chance to go back to DC. So I went, and while I was there interviewing with this person, I asked them, I was like, is there anyone else that I should interview with for my package? And this person said, yes, you should interview with Tom Porter, who is currently the executive vice president of government affairs at Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans America, which I work for. And he's like, you should meet with him. So I called him up. He had time that day, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. So I went and met with him. And then a couple weeks later, he called me up and he said, hey, we have an opening. What do you think about interviewing? So I did. And then I'm here today working for this amazing organization. I didn't know what I wanted to do after school, because I put so much of myself into our organization and didn't really think, wasn't probably the best plan of what I was going to do after. I loved where I was, but it just happened that because I took chances and because I was willing to just kind of be like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I ended up having the job of a lifetime. So I wouldn't change it for anything, and really excited to see where it takes me. I'm only a year and a half in, and and loving it more and more every day.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. And what I love about what you just said is it sounds like you practice what I equate to bold leadership. So taking chances, sometimes not having the path laid out, but knowing that if you take a step forward, it could open up incredible doors that you might not even be aware of. I did something similar myself. During a global pandemic, landed basically my dream job. I'm a senior researcher with an incredible company out of Arlington, Virginia called Forest Marsh Group. And my research portfolio has to do with military workplace climate research. I got here because I made a bold move about 2.5 years ago, and I left my job with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I took a job with a small company that some mentors, some people told me was a risky move. But I decided, we should always listen to what our mentors have to say. You don't always have to follow their advice. And in that moment, I just had this feeling that I had to make a move, and I made the move. Sadly, that company closed during the pandemic, but the connections I made landed me my dream job. So bold leadership, be bold. Sometimes you have to make decisions. Weigh the risk with the benefits, but be bold. So moving on to our next question. Oh my goodness, we've got questions coming in left and right. All right, how do I do this? One question, I want to save these for later. I don't want to get into your questions, audience, yet. We're going to hold on to these because I have some more questions that I want to talk to our leaders about here, but I will get to you, I promise. So some of SVA, I believe yesterday, a lot of people were talking about the challenges that we faced over the last year. We've had to navigate remote environments during a global pandemic, parenting children who've been uprooted from schools, and also operating in a very politically divided country. Just very briefly, all of our panelists, what is one just personal challenge that you faced over the last year? And Savannah, let's go to you.
Motivation. I wanted to say Zoom burnout because I feel like everyone has that issue. And I am not, I definitely had Zoom burnout, but motivation has been super difficult. Being a PhD student, being a reservist, being president of my chapter, and still trying to find time to do things I actually enjoy doing. And so, just sitting in front of a computer 8-10 hours a day, I didn't want to say 10, but it was realistically 10. It's just exhausting. It's exhausting. And wanting to continue with my degree was a super big struggle. I was like, why am I doing this? What am I doing with my life? I just sit in front of a computer. And so motivating myself to want to continue was a huge challenge for me. And it's a struggle for everyone, but I think it hit a little harder this year.
I hear you. I feel you on that. I'm your person. You need a little push with that PhD. You pick up that phone, girl. I got your back.
All right.
Ashley, how about you?
I would say motivation, but kind of in a different way than Savannah, just because with the way that I came about my position in the SVA, I wasn't expecting to be president. I wasn't expecting to take on all of these roles. I just started at UNCW in spring of last year, so January, and then the pandemic hit. And so then I wasn't going to school full time, and I was really excited to be going to in-person classes full time. And so shortly after that is when I found out I would be secretary, and then later on in around August, September is kind of when things started to fall out, and I kind of stepped in to take the presidential role. And it's just been difficult because I was still trying to handle my school, my schoolwork, my home life, dealing with the move because I actually don't live in North Carolina anymore. I'm in Florida. So there's been a lot of different factors that have been really stressful for me. So it's kind of been like a burnout has been a big issue, but then also trying to make sure that the SVO is still going and trying to build back these connections that we kind of lost in between switching out the different board members and then also the pandemic. So that has been a challenge, but it's definitely been so rewarding and so fun to kind of just push through it and instead of just dropping the ball and not doing anything.
A long time ago, actually, I believe it was at an SVA leadership event that I was at. One of the mentors that was talking, she said, balance doesn't exist. I hate the word balance. I don't even want to talk about it anymore because so often as women, we're just surviving. We have so many things to juggle when it comes to all of our different intersectional identities and our incredible load of responsibility. How do we get to this point where we're actually thriving and not just surviving? And I think during this pandemic, that has absolutely been so hard. Lorena, how about you? What's a big challenge that you've faced?
Well, there were positives and negatives that came out of the pandemic, right? So first of all, they come from our personalities. Everyone is a hybrid introvert or extrovert. And it's awesome that I can skip Miami traffic and not have to go to class. And, I get some personal space at the grocery store, but more importantly, being in the room with veterans and speaking to them and gauging the pulse of how they're doing, it's not an option anymore. And so with the absence of that, I thought that I was making a mistake, and because I wasn't vulnerable enough to talk about hey, maybe this wasn't a mistake, it's just a challenge that we have to overcome. I took it really personally, and it really grabbed me down deep in my heart. And I had to come around to the fact that, you know, this is a challenge and we're going to make mistakes. And overcoming that has been really a tough part of, you know, when you're offline, when you're by yourself, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're staring at the ceiling. Those are the things that, you know, kind of grip me, you know.
Right. Vulnerability takes courage. Right. I think that was a Brene Brown. Vulnerability takes courage. It's so true. And we all struggle with it. So thank you so much for sharing that. Caitlin, how about you?
So I think one of the biggest struggles during all of this is obviously the work-life balance. So I'm very blessed in the fact that I've been able to work from home since the middle of March, and so really haven't had to worry about my kids having to be home from school. And then also I decided to spend the time in the pandemic back in my hometown of in Ohio, and my kids are enrolled in a very small private school. I think there's 10 kids in my son's class. There's like nobody in there, but my daughter is home with me on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she's 4. So when I have to do meetings with members of Congress staff and people like that, sometimes she just wants to come running in the room, and thankfully everyone is extremely understanding, but it's hard to not get frustrated and get irritated because she doesn't understand that mommy has to work and mommy has to do all of these things. She just knows that I'm home and she can see me and I'm her favorite person because I exist in the room with her. So she wants to be around me. So definitely finding that work-life balance, and also unplugging at the end of the day. So because I'm at home and I'm sitting in front of my computer all day, telling myself that it's 6 o'clock at night. You don't need to be checking your email anymore. You don't need to be checking social media anymore from the veteran space. You can unplug. And so making sure that I do that. And so giving myself times in which I don't pick up my phone, so that I'm making sure that I focus my attention where my attention is needed. But that was definitely a struggle in the beginning of all of this.
I feel that so much, and I frequently take social media breaks myself. I'm taking a big break from Facebook. Facebook makes me crazy. But I think it's really, I think setting those personal boundaries, having to unplug in this virtual environment, it's a need. I mean, it is an absolute mental health need for all of us. And there's lots of resources out there when it comes to time management and trying to unplug. So if any of you out there in the audience need help with that, reach out. We're here for you. Savannah, you mentioned something that is just inherent to this environment that we're all trying to function in, and that's Zoom burnout. This is a term that is often brought up to me during mentorship sessions that I have with students. And many of us students and working professionals, we're likely going to stay in these virtual environments moving forward. So as a leader, Savannah, how are you continuing to engage your membership in these virtual environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been a constant struggle. I know in the last year, like Ashley mentioned, she's seen a decline in membership and trying to build back up her chapter. And we are no different. Like, we've had the same issues, and you know, people aren't wanting to engage online because you're online for work, you're online for school, and it's just a lot to take in. And so some ways that I've tried to, you know, figure that out were we did different like virtual fun happy hour things where we did like a pumpkin carving during Halloween, and we did a gingerbread making house contest where we, like, you know, were able to give people like a t-shirt or like a mug or, you know, something fun to try and engage our members. And but a positive that came out of this, because right now, like, University of Florida is partially in person, partially online. And because of the online environment, we've actually had more engagement from our distance learners who are veterans. So the people who are active duty, who might be going to UF, people that live out of state who are veterans. And so we've now moved into this kind of hybrid kind of location where some people come in online at the same time we're still engaging our audience on Zoom. And so we've kind of enhanced like our general body meetings where we've added We do alumni spotlights now where alumni are allowed to come in and talk to our members for like 10 minutes, either about their struggles as a student veteran, maybe their career paths they've taken, any bits of advice for finding a job. And then we've also added and ingrained some professional development. So like we had a VA representative come in and talk to them and answer some questions. We've done, resume building. So we've tried to enhance the Zoom or online experience through offering more to our members that they may not have access to, or they may not feel comfortable going outside or going to campus, because campus, a lot of campuses are still like hotbeds for COVID cases, or they have somebody at home that's vulnerable. And so I think that enhancing that experience and giving value to those meetings or to those functions beyond just the social aspect is kind of encouraging to get people to want to be involved. And I'm super excited to be able to engage more with our distance learners, because that's been an audience that's been really difficult to reach for us. And UF has a great online program, so we have a lot of student veterans in that distance learning program.
That's amazing. And actually, Lorena, I know that you've been doing some interesting things with your chapter over the last year. So could you sort of highlight that? How have you been dealing with Zoom burnout and your membership when it comes to engagement?
So part of what I'm going to talk about is more related to the planning aspect of it, because even before the pandemic, having a plan put together, a strategy, is really important. So while we're dialing down a little bit on the Zoom meetings, I'm not trying to push more Zoom meetings onto our classmates. They're already burned out. We understand that. And one of those things that we used is I'm a tools person. I love tools, but this is not the time to start changing up and being like, hey, we're using this new messaging app. So our responsibility as leaders is to meet the veteran where they are, wherever that is. So we've increased our Instagram presence, and also we already use in our chapter, in our school, we use a lot of WhatsApp group chats. So we're meeting the student veteran where they already are, where they can already refer to. And then the second portion of it is something that happens offline, and that is establishing your chapter's philosophy and strengthening that while we have the time to do it. And one of the ways that we did it was to recognize who we were trying to reach and what the vision was behind the SVA chapter. Because oftentimes when we're churning out events and we're doing this and we're doing that, we lose sight of what's really important. And getting your team together around that idea of your vision and the values that you have as a leader and putting that out increases the motivation for your team members, and by extension, the people who are seeing you do that great work and they see why you're doing that work is incredibly important. So taking stock of those things. One of my philosophies is adding people who are traditional students, those who don't have experience dealing with veterans, because we often get stuck in a little bubble and we talk to each other about our struggles as veterans. But then also there's a lack of perspective too, because we're lacking the perspective from the traditional student and what they see and what the veteran is going through. So starting that conversation. So that's just an idea for a vision that you can have as a chapter leader. And that's something that we've worked really hard on over the last year, because while we did have some downtime in what they saw, we were building our image in terms of the values we put out.
I really like how you framed that in meeting the veterans where they are. And to me, what that is a perfect description is empathetic leadership. And we know that there are certain qualities that leaders have. Of course, it's on an entire spectrum, right? There's no magic serum that creates the perfect leader, but empathy and leading with empathy and understanding and meeting people where they are, and patience and listening, all of these things go into empathetic leadership. And you've got it. You've got it. So Ashley, I want to turn to you. Looking ahead, what are one or two priorities or goals that you have as a leader for your chapter?
So right now we're working, I kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, but we're working on building back our relationships with the different organizations out in our town. And one of those is we're actually starting a mentorship program at UNCW. We're working with a nonprofit organization called Whole Vet in North Carolina. And what we're trying to do basically is work with or find transitioning service members, veterans, national and reservists, and their family members, and getting them together with a mentor from, some big companies. And then it's basically just to, have that mentorship with somebody else who you could potentially get a future job with, and just helping to make that connection. Because one thing that I've repeatedly have heard during some of the breakout rooms is how important it is for us to not only just get out in the military and then go to school. It's like we need to get out of the military, go to school, and then know what we're going to be like, know how to live the civilian life. And I think that's a lot of things that people struggle with, is we don't really know. Even in high school and elementary school, like they don't teach us these life goals that we really need to know. It's kind of funny because we always talk about it with our friends. We're like, I didn't learn how to make a budget, or how to go grocery shopping or anything like that in school, but important life skills that we need. So I'm really excited about this mentorship program, and I'm just really excited to get our SVO back on track and get us building more relationships with organizations off base and building relationships within our organization.
Those sound like incredible goals. I think one of the best things that you can do for your chapter are building your local and community relationships, so that not only those relationships benefit your chapter at this moment in time, but so that when you pass the baton and other people take the helm of your organization, those foundational community relationships are still there. And they continue to grow and to build and become stronger over time. So that's incredible. Caitlin, I want to bounce back to you. As an advocate in DC working on a portfolio that includes women veterans issues, what is one key area that you want us all to be paying attention to right now?
So women veterans is obviously one of my top priorities, but that also includes women service members. And so over the past year, it's become impossible to ignore the sexual assault and the sexual harassment problem in the military, and countless videos and stories are surfacing every day. One as recent as yesterday, and it just shows the glaring need for change, and not just culture change, because we've been calling for culture change for so long, but also legislatively. And one such change that I think that we can focus on is the Military Justice Improvement Act, which would remove prosecution decisions from the chain of command and give it to independently trained prosecutors. So because often we're seeing issues with, and obviously this is not just a woman service member issue, it just disproportionately affects women every day. And so instead of the chain of command getting to decide if something should be prosecuted, it gives it to someone else to make that decision. I grew up the daughter of a Navy veteran, and my family is heavy in the military. And the fact that I don't want to tell my daughter that she can join the military because I don't want to even think of something like that happening to her, it breaks my heart, because that's something that I always thought of, being like, oh, my daughter's name is Olivia. Olivia, I would love for you to join the Navy or whatever branch she wants to join, but obviously Navy is, heavy with me, but I don't want that for her. And so until we see change legislatively and also culturally, until we see leaders that don't just say they have a zero tolerance policy, but actually prove it with their actions, it's not something that I want for her. And if anyone ever came to me, it's not something that I would suggest until we see those changes made.
Thank you so much. And Caitlin, you work for IAVA, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So for people in the audience, if you want more information on this, Caitlin, can they contact you, or do you have a specific avenue in the organization where if people want more information about this, where they can go?
You can always reach out to me. So by my email address, which is Caitlin, my first name, at iava.org. And I'm always happy to answer any questions and direct you to where you need to go. But then we also have our website, which details all of our priorities. Obviously, women veterans and service members is not our only priority. We have a lot of different priorities. And also our website is where you can become a member, which is free. No, you don't have to pay any dues. There's nothing like that. And IAVA accepts veterans, service members, and family members of any era, any discharge status. So it doesn't matter who you are when you served, you can always be a member of IAVA. And we send out emails and updates and things like that on what we are currently advocating for every week.
Thank you. Very important indeed. I told you time is just a flying. I keep looking at this clock. So before we get to this question and answer session, a very important question, near and dear to my heart. What can we do as a community to advance the leadership of minority veterans across SVA, but also in the broader veteran community? You know, our veteran community writ large is still, we need to propel the leadership of minority veterans, like all of us, into these top positions. What do you feel we can do to help make that happen? Savannah, let's go to you first.
That's a big question to ask. So I think that it's really important to really create an inclusive environment. And I know that that's kind of thrown around a lot, and we want to create a sense of belonging, but I think that a lot of people don't look at another person's perspective. So like put yourself in someone else's shoes to try and understand why they're feeling what they're feeling, you know, or maybe just acknowledge some experiences they've had, you know, to make sure that you're creating a nurturing and positive environment. And so that way it encourages people in minorities to want to come together. And then like for us, like, you know, Lorraine was talking and she said that, you know, someone like me, like I saw a leader like me. And so encouraging one another to be supportive. So like this group of women here is really exciting for me because I'm like, wow, like we have so many similarities, and, you know, like I feel like empowered to want to go back to my chapter, and, you know, I feel rejuvenated. And so creating an environment like this and showing that we are in these leadership roles and showcasing, you know, members who are maybe like, ask them to be in a leadership role, and you know, just creating this really great cultural environment that's going to welcome everyone of every walk of life, and, you know, understanding where they're coming from, even if you're not like them, you know, that's super important. I think that it's hard to like put it into words on how to create that, but I think honestly, just trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes, or at least understand and acknowledge where they're coming from and respect that, is really important.
Thank you. I think you summed that up beautifully. So I want to jump to our questions from the audience now. We've got them coming in. We have an audience member who is, looks like they're a Guard member. How is it balancing reserve life with school and trying to connect with other vets? Being in the Guard, I found it hard to connect with other vets because I'm only a Guardsman, and many resources, even these breakout sessions, are aimed at people who were active and got out, and there is little mention of Guard and reservists. Do we have anyone on our panel who might be able to shed some light on that? Savannah?
Yeah, so I'm a reservist. I did start off active duty, so my experience is a little bit different. You know, I think that because I'm a reservist, like I purposely try and look for other people in the reserve, because I think that is an underserved kind of veteran population, because they're not always around, and, you know, people like to make jokes about the reserve, and, you know, we just like to just do nothing all day, which is definitely not true. And so I can't really give you an answer on how I balance all that. I think that organization's really key. I think that keeping a really strict calendar, and then time management. So like right now I'm actually on drill weekend. So I came straight from drill to here to do this conference. So I don't recommend doing that. It just so happens they fell on the same weekend. And we actually have some other executive board members who were active duty and switched to the reserve or the Guard. I think it's Air National Guard. And so I think that as student veterans, if we just put acknowledgement towards reservists and acknowledge them as our peers, that's super important, because a lot of times as reservists, we're kind of looked at like, the step kid, or like, you're just there on the weekends. You don't really know how to do your job, which is definitely not true. And so I think that as leaders in SVA, it's really important to acknowledge those people as peers and really like know their experience. I know a lot of reservists that have been on multiple deployments and have probably done more than half of people in active duty. And so just acknowledging that experience and respecting it is key. But balancing reserve life, I don't know, like it's insane all the time. So I just keep a strict calendar hour by hour, and I'm organized. Those are my tools.
Well, I'm so glad that you made it here with us. Not glad that you're going to have to hustle like crazy this weekend, but I'm really glad to have you. So next question. Our campus averages 40 women veterans. It is difficult to connect the women vets into the veteran campus programs. I would like to invite one or more of our vets to join our SVA chapter leadership. Any suggestions on how we can reach out and create a more welcoming environment for our women vets? One issue we are really concerned with is being fearful that as men, we might say something wrong or offensive, especially if a woman vet might have suffered from sexual trauma. Any of our panel members? I'm going to start us off here. I think that the audience member who wrote this question, you are on the right track with what you're doing right now. You're asking these questions, and I think probably a good step for you to take is to reach out to somebody with SVA national leadership, or me. You can reach out to me, and we can talk through some of these issues at length. But I think being sensitive, certainly that. Yes, there are a lot of dynamics that are going on, but everything that you can learn about making your environments, whether it's an SVA chapter or a classroom or your, if you have a lounge on your campus, how to make those environments feel more inclusive will go a long way. And again, the fact that you're even thinking about this and that there's a willingness there and an understanding how important it is to have diverse leadership at your chapter is huge. And I think that don't be afraid to put out a public announcement that says, look, we don't have any women or many women in our leadership, and we need you to lead with us because we understand that that is what makes us stronger. Invite them in, publicly invite them in. So that's my advice to you. Don't be afraid to be vocal and invite people who don't look like you in, but you're on the right track. So let's talk more about that. Moving on to the next question.
Can I add something really quick?
Oh, go ahead, Caitlin.
Sorry. So I think also if you have the capability, I think another good thing to do is if you're noticing that you're not having a lot of interaction from women veterans within your program, if you have the capability to send out some sort of survey to maybe their student email or something like that to see not just to women, but like to all of the veterans on campus to see why it is people might not be participating. You might be able to get some information on what types of programs or what types of events might welcome a more diverse population into your program.
Research-driven insights, love it. Wonderful suggestion, Caitlin. I'm kind of jealous I didn't come up with that myself, but so important. Yeah, do a Google poll or SurveyMonkey. There's tons of free resources out there that you can use. So research-driven insights, always valuable. I think this will be our last question. Have any of you dealt with male leaders or members in your orgs or outside of them that still have toxic mindsets from active service? If so, how have you handled that?
I can push on this one. So knowing that I look different than most female veterans, or, there's a little section of difference in there. It is a big asset for me. You know, I look a little different, but then I do run into issues, not all the time. This is just an outlier, where there are people with competing positions, opinions, or what have you. I think more than anything, listening to them and why they think that way is one of the ways to kind of bridge the gap in between and trying to be as empathetic as you can. That being said, that does not mean you have to put up with rude behavior or what have you. You only accept what you accept, and that is it. And being very firm and direct about that situation. I'm not sure exactly the context of the question, unfortunately, but we have had members before, way in the past, that had differing opinions and that were very rude, and they were vulgar and they were inappropriate. And addressing those things honestly and directly with the person, you can pull them aside if you'd like, and explaining to them, hey, this is not how I like to be talked to, and that goes to not being taken seriously as a woman veteran too. Being direct and open about those things while still being empathetic, you know, listening to them is one of the biggest ways that we got people to come around to being a little more inclusive.
Thank you, Lorena. I think what you just said was open and honest and to the point, and everybody should take that advice. And certainly, you know, I speak for myself here, but certainly if there are people in our audience who want to, again, engage with these tough conversations, please feel free to reach out. In closing, I want to do a round robin real quick. What is a book, blog, or podcast that you recommend to the audience? Savannah, go.
I like Science Rules with Bill Nye, big science nerd. It's a podcast.
Ashley.
Okay, if you've ever seen Scrubs, then go listen to the podcast called Fake Doctors, Real Friends. It's with Zach Braff and Donald Faison, and it's hilarious. And if you've never seen Scrubs, go watch it. Go listen to the podcast. It'll just make your day. It's hilarious.
Caitlin.
So I am absolutely obsessed with octopuses. So a book that I would recommend if anybody is in love with octopuses or cephalopods in general, it would be The Soul of an Octopus. It's a very interesting book just about octopuses and the way that their mind works and things like that, and you get to just have a little more insight into them as a whole.
Perfect. And Lorena.
Yeah, so I'm a business nerd. So I have Start With Why by Simon Sinek. You can go on his TED Talk. It's free. And the How I Built This Podcast with Guy Raz is absolutely incredible.
Thank you. And my recommendation is a novel that I'm currently reading. It's a post-apocalyptic novel called A Boy and His Dog. I've been doing a lot of novel reading throughout the last year. So very quickly in closing, everyone, please keep being curious and keep being courageous. Keep asking and participating in hard conversations, but don't just stop there. Turn your words into action, as we learned earlier from the general session with my good friend Timothy Jones. And remember, we are all here to help, so reach out. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of our women leaders of SVA on our panel today.